Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to the third network webinar of today, the network of Education Leadership Network Europe. We are organizing a series of webinars, and if you haven't participated in the previous two webinars today, I would like to welcome you to the third one, which is about education leadership in early childhood education. Our network, the Education Leadership Network Europe, is focusing on collaborative education leadership and democratic decision-making. We have 100 partners already in the project, and we started last year, actually 2023 autumn, and it will take for 4 years up until we present a lot of actions and discussions where we would like to invite lots of stakeholders in education. We have 5 leaders of the network, the education employers, EFI, who are coordinating the project, education teacher trade unions, ETUCE, parents associations, the European Parents Association, EPA, school heads associations, the European School Head Association, ESHA, and students organizations, OBESU, from the secondary school level. I am Agnes Roman. I'm the senior policy coordinator of the teacher trade unions, ETUCE, and I would like to welcome you to this webinar. You are muted and your cameras are also centrally blocked, but I don't want that it discourages you of participating in this webinar, because if you see on the top of the window, there is a chat button. Also, there is a Q&A button, but we also would like to have Slido questions to you, and we would like to ask your active participation in any part of the webinar in written form. Access to early childhood education is still not equal. This was the outcome of the previous year's Education Training Monitor. And this year of the Education Training Monitor, which was published in November, focused a lot about teacher shortage. This is why we were thinking about that under the topic of collaborative school leadership. We wanted to discuss about what are the collaborations which are important, which are positive in order to make the profession attractive. This is why we deal now in this webinar, and this is the title of the webinar, how collaborative school leadership can help with tackling staff shortages in the early childhood education sector. I would like to welcome all speakers. Firstly, Geraldine Libro from the European Commission DG EAC, the second speaker, Kasper Poulsen from the Danish Union of Early Childhood Educators and Youth Educators, BUPL. The third speaker will be Elena Odysseus from the Cypriot Confederation of Parents Associations. And the fourth speaker will be Peter Opteide from the Catholic Education Flanders on the employer's side. I really hope that there will be occasions for us for having an open discussion also at the end of the presentations. This is why I asked all the presenters to be very concise, very short, and to really have some discussions at the end. First of all, I would like to open a Slido poll to learn who we are here. I can see already 37 people joined us. And I would like to ask you who you are, where do you work? Just to get to know each other in general. You can see a window popped up. Please tell us about your daily job, where do you work? And later on, we will also show the outcomes. And I would like to give now the floor to Geraldine Libro from the European Commission. We asked you to present us the European Commission work on early childhood education, specifically the work of the working group on this policy brief of staff shortages in early childhood education and care. I understand that you have a presentation, so if you would like to share it, it's possible.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Geraldine Libro. I work in the European Commission in the Directorate General Education and Culture. And I follow everything related to early childhood education and care. So today I will be telling you a little bit about the work we've been doing on staff shortages in the sector. So the first thing that I want to mention is that we start from a very big challenge, which is that we have a policy objective, which is to increase accessibility and availability of early childhood education and care for all children and their families. So whatever their background, their individual circumstances, family or socioeconomic circumstances, we believe that all the children should be able to participate in early childhood education and care, meaning from birth to primary school education. But all of this we want to achieve without sacrificing the quality of the education and care that we provide to these children. And the problem is that we have a number of challenges to face. There are some systemic challenges. Governance of the system is not always very efficient. Lack of staff is a very important one, and we'll be talking about it today. And also we have some crises which have made our policy objectives even more difficult to reach, like the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the inflation, and many other things which are posing problems for the sector. So in the European Working Group on Early Childhood Education and Care, we are discussing a number of topics, and we had a specific discussion on staff shortages, which led to the publication of a policy brief. This was published in November, and it's now available in all the languages on the websites that you see here. And in this policy brief, we try to look at the state of play, the impact of all these staff shortages, the causes and the solutions. And today I will focus on the impact and the solutions. But I want to say a word just about the state of play. We have a specific difficulty in the early childhood education and care sector, which is the heterogeneity of all the professions. There are many different professions and many different professionals who look after children from 0 to 6, and it's very difficult to identify really the exact state of play of staff shortages. There is also a lack of data, and sometimes we need better coordination for gathering information to really understand the state of play of staff shortages in the sector. But we have a lot of individual pieces of information. For instance, in some countries, like in my country, in France, there is a government plan to have 200,000 places more just in the creches. So the 0 to 3 by 2030. 200,000 more places, but at the moment we already lack 10,000 professionals. So this gives you an idea, for instance, of one country and the challenges that they are facing, but we have information that in many countries we have a lot of staff shortages. And we insist on the impact that this has, because we believe that if we don't fully grasp the impact of these staff shortages, no policy action will be taken. So I want to say a word now to really detail the impacts that we have identified. The first one is about, of course, availability and accessibility of ECEC. If we don't have enough ECEC professionals, well qualified, motivated to stay in the profession, then we can simply not offer enough places to the children and the families who need them. The second impact that we want to highlight is that we want to have not only early childhood education and care, but high quality early childhood education and care, which means that we need trained professionals. We need enough professionals to work with the children. And it's very important that we do not sacrifice quality to quantity. So it's not because we want to have more places in ECEC that we should aim at measures which reduce the quality of ECEC. Another impact that we need to take into account is that we want ECEC to be inclusive. So we are really, we know now from research and loads of experimentations that access to early childhood education and care is good for the inclusion of the most vulnerable children who come from disadvantaged background. So we need to have these children accessing quality ECEC. But if it's bad quality ECEC, it has an impact on the inclusion. Also, if we want to welcome children with disabilities in ECEC, you need a good staff-child ratio. You need people who are professional, who are qualified to support these children. So if you don't have all these good conditions, then you can't foster inclusion in early childhood education and care. Another piece of impact that we need to think about is that the child safety and the well-being may be endangered by the lack of professionals. If there are not enough professionals or if they are not well trained, there might be very severe impact on the child safety and their well-being. Another impact that we need to consider is that it's a vicious circle. The less professionals you have in the sector, the more it endangers the workforce stability, because the profession becomes less attractive if the working conditions are not good, and the working conditions are not good if there are not enough professionals. So it's important to also consider that we want to stop this vicious circle. And the last and maybe wider impact that we want everybody to understand is the economic impact on society. So it's not only for the children that we can provide early childhood education and care, but it also supports the employment of their parents. So we see in a number of countries, and at the moment, if we look at the US, for instance, it's really a catastrophe where loads of people cannot go into employment because there are not enough childcare places. So it's really important to also have another point of view to understand the impact on society. And also, if you don't have children participating in early childhood education and care, we know that we are giving them less chances to succeed later, especially in school, since children participate in early childhood education and care have better chances in school. They increase their learning, their skills, and it boosts really their chances also of enrolling in higher education. So all of this has been proven, but it needs to be reminded constantly that there are a lot of impact which must be taken into account when we talk about staff shortages in ECEC. Then what to do about it? The first thing is to understand the causes. So each country needs to really have a good evaluation of the various causes behind these staff shortages. And as a consequence, they need to adopt some measures. And we see that in a number of countries, some short-term measures have been adopted, which might have an impact on the quality. Like, for instance, allowing the recruitment of people who are not qualified to work with the children. So we understand that sometimes it's really a need and they really want to support families, but it's also very important to adopt long-term measures which will address staff shortages in the long term and also help the children receive more higher quality early childhood education and care. So the long-term measures that we've been considering, there are many, but the most important ones, the first one is to develop strategies with all the stakeholders, so work with the trade unions, work with the universities, work with the training providers, with local policymakers, with everybody who has a role in reducing staff shortages. Another very important one is to value the profession and recognize that early childhood education and care is not babysitting. You need educators, you do not need babysitters, so you need to work on that. Another approach is to diversify the recruitment strategies, try to identify different roles within the settings and in the creches, in the kindergartens, which will maybe help recruiting different types of people. More men, more people with a cultural background, maybe completely different people who have not been thinking about early childhood so far, but maybe you need to present the profession in a way that it will attract to diverse profiles. Another topic which is very important is to improve the career prospects for people to stay in the profession. So some people might be attracted to the profession, join in, but after a few years, they may want some change. So it's really important to give them some career prospects. Another thing is to offer some continuing professional development opportunities to all the staff, so the educators, the leaders, the assistants, all of them should benefit from regular opportunities to train and learn new pedagogies, understand better how the children develop. Thanks to all the neuroscience now, we have lots of knowledge becoming available. So it's really important that all the professionals who work with the children receive this training. And last but not least, we need to improve the working conditions of the staff who work in the sector. And we're not only talking about salaries, which are of course a very important topic, but we're also talking about giving more time for training, allowing for time for team building, for team learning, for training, for reflecting about the work. It means also having a good staff-child ratio so that a professional is not alone with too many children. So all of these are measures which we suggest should be considered to address staff shortages in ECEC. And obviously, when it comes to leadership, leaders have a big role in making sure that this happens. They have a big role in supporting the staff to stay in the profession, but they also can play a role in bringing more people into the profession and supporting the policymakers in understanding the causes of staff shortages and addressing them. So our working group, which has prepared this policy brief, will be working on leadership in the coming 2 years. And one of the topics that we will be addressing is actually how the leaders can help in reducing staff shortages. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing some of the ideas today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. This is very interesting presentation. But we can see also that there are generally unattractive problems, like problems concerning unattractiveness of the teaching profession, which has hit the early childhood education even more, because as we know, in many countries, as low as early age a person teaches, as lower is the salary. So early childhood education is the lowest, then goes upper and upper until higher education. And the early childhood education is a mostly female occupied sector. Around 95% of the persons are female. So it even faces more challenges. And I wonder to what extent you are dealing also with these challenges in the working group and the European Commission work.
Yeah, we produced a report which was called Guidelines to Recruit, Train and Motivate Well-Qualified Professionals. This was published in 2021, and we had a whole chapter about recruiting men in the sector. And we see that this is really a much bigger societal challenge, because it also has to do with the image of men in general. There is a reluctance from families quite often to have men looking after their children, and especially babies. But there is also the image that it's a female profession because, you know, women know how to take care of children. It's in their genes and it comes naturally to them. And this is still a preconception that runs around the society, unfortunately, quite a lot. So it has to do with the changing society, but it has to do with also some small techniques that we can have to bring men more into the profession. Some of them are about diversifying the roles. So if you have different types of jobs in a creche, in a kindergarten, you might find some which are more appealing to men. So we try to imagine all sorts of strategies, but it's a really, really big battle.
Thank you very much. If you could share with us the link to these guidelines of the European Commission working group in the chat, it would be very much appreciated, I guess, all the participants. I can see already we are almost 50 people, so I would like to ask the colleagues to show us who we are here. What was the answer to the Slido poll? Okay, mostly employer organizations, it's great, then trade unions, early childhood education sectors, 80% of you are working in early childhood, the primary, other education institutions, very good, that university, and some colleagues are here also from ministries. I would like to open the second Slido poll. We would like to ask you, what is your opinion? What do you think are the biggest challenges in the early childhood education sector in your country nowadays? What is the challenge for pupils, for parents, for staff management? We have been discussing here about challenges for staff shortages, but broader challenges also, for example, access. And I also know that access is one of the biggest problems, because parents need to have money to pay for early childhood services. In many countries, it's not provided by for free. And also, even if it is paid, it's very difficult to find places. But as we discussed, there are many other challenges. So if you could just answer to our question, During that time, I would like to give the opportunity to Kasper Poulsen from the Danish Union of Early Childhood Education to tell us what are the challenges and solutions to tackle staff shortages in the early childhood education in Denmark. You are representing here BUPL, which is a trade union of specifically early childhood education staff. So you are also involved in social dialogue, but in cooperation with parents associations, employers organizations, and broader stakeholders. Welcome, and I would like to give you the floor.
First of all, thank you so much for providing me the opportunity to zoom in on some of the challenges that Geraldine actually very well pointed out. I'm Kasper Poulsen, and I represent the BUPL, which is a trade union in Denmark covering the early childhood teachers. We also union affiliated with the ETUCE. Let's see if my dots will come up here sometimes. Fast here. I have some latency, but it should work now. Perfect. So we organize around the 60,000 early childhood teachers in Denmark. We refer to this group as pedagogues. They have a 3.5-year education, what we refer to a bachelor's degree in social education. They work in crèches, kindergartens, pre-primary and primary schools. So we cover a vast part of the education system. To touch upon some of the topics also mentioned by Geraldine, in a Danish perspective, we see here to the right a failed recruitment rate from 2019 to 2023. And what you can see is, of course, it has risen. I think this is the case in most countries, but it has risen quite a lot. So right now, in Denmark, we are experiencing a shortage of 4,000 pedagogues, and in 2030, we estimate this will be around 8,000 pedagogues. So this is quite a lot in Denmark. It's a consequence what we see in failed recruitment of 43% in 2023, and right now we see in some municipalities more than 60%. So this is an account for the average. So every fourth educator can also retire within the next 5 to 10 years. So we see this triple squeeze effect that some pedagogues choose to work outside the profession. Some will retire in the nearest future, and we see fewer young people coming into the profession. So we need to look at this holistically. See the next slide coming on here. Yeah, so I'm very sorry for the Danish, so I will try to translate. So this is a graph that says why young people do not want to train as early childhood teachers. And I'm not going to touch upon the red pillar on the left, because it has to do with that the education or the training program is not interesting for the person, because we have a lot of training programs. So of course, this will always be quite high. But we look at the Turkish one, and we also look at the blue one. We can see that 31% of young people they opt out of this kind of programs because the salary is not high enough, is not attractive enough, and the blue one, that there are not sufficient ways in terms of continuous professional development, career prospects. It was a great word they used by Geraldine. This is around 21-22%. So what we see is that the young people, and this study is conducted on 19,000 young people that have an upper secondary education that could qualify for this program. So with the prospect of low pay, but also that there are poor career prospects currently in Denmark, makes a lot of young people opt out of this profession. So what we can see is that if we can increase the pay, but we can also increase the working conditions and the recognition of the profession, we will see a lot more young people coming into the profession. And this is done by a statistical institute on behalf of BUPL. So we regard it as reliable data. So I'll go on to the next slide. No, let me just add one more thing, that what we see on the right hand side, the blue pillar here, it says higher recognition in society for the profession of early childhood teachers, and we can see that this is also meaningful for young people. So it's not only to do with pay and career prospect, it also has to do with recognizing the role as an early childhood teacher as a role that is important in the society, and this has suffered throughout the years, unfortunately. And I'm very happy to answer questions afterwards. I've been told to give sort of a brief preview of how we see the situation in a Danish context. So if we look in the context of school leadership, what can then be the solutions? What we see in Denmark is that some municipalities are actually succeeding. And when they're succeeding, they're using some of the elements that are present here at the screen. So that could be promoting continuous professional development, having clear career prospects for a young person coming into profession is important, because we are living in a world now where you're not necessarily in a profession for 30, 40, maybe 50 years, maybe it's only 10 years. So what we see now is that 11,000 early childhood teachers in Denmark work outside the profession. What we believe is that if we can promote continuous professional development and good career ways, we can make people develop into the profession, and that would be good for quality. It would be good for staff retention, and also making it attractive to be an early childhood teacher. What we also see is those municipalities that implement systematic educational planning are very well succeeding in terms of retaining their staff. So what is systematic educational planning? Well, it has to do with sort of creating a living playing field where you are very clear on the conditions that you're supposed to take on continuous professional development. There are clear paths, there are clear planning in order to get this done. So if, for instance, it's annually done by having a sort of a development plan for staff, and following up on this. And we've seen the municipalities that are doing that, they have a larger retainment rate of early childhood teachers. All of this is connected by social dialogue. We also have the health and safety. That is an important aspect that is also impacted by having fewer colleagues. You have to run faster. You have to accept that you cannot do all you want to do in your profession. You cannot live up to the quality because there's just not enough time, not enough heads or hands. One thing I really want to touch upon is introducing mentorship programs. And this is because what we see is in 1 out of 5 pedagogues, after 5 years, when they finish their training as early childhood teachers, they leave the profession. So why is that? Well, sometimes it has to do with the job not living up to the thought you had in the first place. But in many instances, it's because you're not able to exercise your new knowledge. You're not, you don't have a culture that is not welcoming, but a culture where you can provide new input and be a part of a hectic workday. So this is something that we are introducing in Denmark, and it has also been proposed by a reform commission that we've had, and it's also been proposed by the government in terms of reforming the education of early childhood teachers. So I think I will stop here, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Kasper. For the moment, I would like rather to give the floor to the next speaker and to have a discussion with all of you at the end, specifically about, for example, your Slido answers about the main difficulties. Then I would like to give the floor to Elena Odysseus from the Cypriot Confederation of Parents Associations of Public and Community Kindergartens, a very long name. I asked you, Elena, to present us what do you think are the impact of staff shortages in general in parents, and I understand that in Cyprus managed to solve the staff shortages, and what are the magic solutions? The floor is yours.
Hello everyone, I'm Elena Odysseus, and actually I represent the European Parents Association. I'm a vice president, and also the long name that you mentioned before. It seems that we have a very different system than in most European countries. In Cyprus, the schools are under the Ministry of Education, and they all follow the same curriculum, either if they are in the public sector or if they are in the private sector. They get better salaries, better working conditions, and people really want to join the system in public schools, but not everyone can do it, of course. A few years back, by the way, the public schools are all free, they don't pay. In community schools, they pay a very small amount, very little comparing to what the parents in private schools pay. But there are some restrictions to join the public schools. You have to be of a certain economic situation. So not parents with high salaries cannot have their children in this kind of schools. And also you have to, you cannot choose where to go. You have to take your children to a kindergarten that is near your place. Having all this in mind, plus there was a competition between the private schools and the public schools, that they actually wanted, the private schools wanted to promote their work, while the public schools were a bit, you know, okay, we do whatever the system says and we don't do anything more than that. We don't try to do better. So we had children going to the primary school from the private schools. They had very good skills in writing, in reading, and then we had children coming from schools with very limited capabilities. So the ministry changed the law, and everyone should follow the same procedure in teaching. They should follow the same curriculum, and so that when children join the primary school, they all have the same qualifications. So we had more people joining the sector. And this has eliminated the problem we had with the excess of teachers in Cyprus. It is a very popular and a profession in Cyprus. So people would join and then they had no job, and then they had to join different kinds of jobs. And when it was their turn to be employed, they had a big gap in education, and they couldn't actually follow the curriculum. So we solved this with the new legislation, and and also the pre-primary schools. In public schools, they end up is from 7:30 in the morning until 1:05, and they finish. While private schools, they start from 6:30 until late afternoon. 5:30, 6, and maybe after that. And now they try to do that in public sector as well, to increase the time of the public schools, so more teachers can cover, more places can be covered from that. I think this is the overall how we managed to do it. The teachers, especially in public schools, they continues try to be educated and follow the new trends in education. And there is also a quite good system for promotions to get a career in the education system. And there are different steps to become more than just a simple teacher, even to go to the Prime Ministry for decision making. So apart from very good salaries, they also have a very good structure on promotions and on getting a good career in education. I think this is all from me now. I'm open for questions as well for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have several questions to you, but instead of posing these questions immediately, I would like to give the floor to Peter Opteinde from the Catholic Education Flanders from the employer side. I asked you to try to focus on the issue of impact of staff shortages and the relation with education management and solution which could be found with the collaborative school leadership, specifically in Belgium, Flanders. Peter, the floor is yours.
So I'm Peter Opteinde from the Flemish Catholic Educational Organization, and I will take the floor now to take you with me to look into, let's say, the new deal for Flemish education and the teaching profession there, where we try to broaden the perspective on dealing with the staff shortages. Which are the challenges for the Flemish educational system in terms of teacher shortages? Well, as you can see, there are, like in all countries, and definitely also in terms of early childhood education, there are some serious issues in terms of teacher shortages, but they are not the biggest, at least in Flanders, they are not the biggest for early childhood education. And the lowest graph here is representing early childhood education, and you see that for now we have, let's say, more or less in terms of teacher shortages, we are looking for 400 full-time equivalents to find in filling up the gaps in schools in terms of early childhood education. It's much worse in primary education and in secondary education at the moment. And if we look at the evolution that we are expecting in terms of recruitment needs in Flemish teacher education, or in Flemish education more correctly, you see that by 25-26 we expect we have to find 6,000 full-time equivalents, and afterwards it will gradually go down. And that's also the case for early childhood education, which is the lower graph. There you see we need more or less 1,000 new teachers in early childhood education by 24-25, and it's more or less stays around that number, that we have to find new teachers, new students that want to get into the profession. Which are the main causes and challenges that we have to tackle in this case? Well, basically, one of the important ones is, of course, the demographic growth. We see more pupils going into early childhood education. You know, in Flanders, that 98% of the 3 to 6-year-olds are attending early childhood education, and that's a big number, and we need enough teachers to also with a respectable teacher-child ratio to provide them with quality education. We see that it's a differentiated picture. It's not the same all over Flanders in this case. And when we look at the inner cities, the problem is worse, and basically because the issues that teachers have to deal with in these schools in the inner cities are much more challenging, and when they have the opportunity, definitely now in periods of teacher shortage in schools, when they have the opportunity to go to easier schools, that's what they do. So they go out of the inner cities and go to schools in the country where it's much less challenging to deal with the difficulties that you have to deal with in the classroom. In general, what are the most wanted teachers, if you want? That's basically the foreign language teacher. But when you look at the whole picture, at the moment, we are looking for all kinds of teachers, going from early childhood education teachers to primary school teachers to different kind of teachers in secondary education. One of the main causes is the attractiveness of the profession. And we see a decline in the number of students in teacher education. And the reason that one of the main reasons there is not so much the salary, because salary in Flanders is the same for primary educational school teachers as for early childhood education teachers, but it's basically how the profession is perceived by the general public, and the status of the profession has to be lower, and also the attractiveness of the profession, and the environment where you have to work in, the conditions that you have to work on are not for a student that has to choose at 18 for a career for the rest of his life, are not very attractive to him or her. On the other hand, and it's also mentioned by some of the other speakers, there is some really significant dropout in the profession, right? Where after 5 years of being in the profession, people tend to look for other challenges outside of the teaching profession, which is very much a worrying issue, because you invest a lot of education and you invest a lot of professional development in those teachers, and once they are more or less experienced, they leave the profession. So that's really something that has to concern us. How do we deal with these staff shortages, or how do schools deal with these staff shortages? And when you look at that, then in the short term, what I do at the moment, so the short-term measure is basically when you don't have enough teachers, you go to larger classes, more pupils for the same teacher, which of course is not very beneficial for the quality. What we also see is that many of the teachers take extra hours and do overtime, which of course is an issue of creating conditions that make teachers very vulnerable to burnout and other issues. So that's also not an ideal solution. But at the moment, when you don't have enough people, when you don't find enough teachers, and you have your pupils in the classroom and you want them to at least have some lessons and at least get some support, it's at some points the only measures that you can take as a head of a school or as a board of a school. We also invest in making lateral entry more attractive by, for example, bringing their seniority into the classroom already, and make sure that the payment is more or less acceptable. But definitely for early childhood education, that's not the biggest group. You don't find a solution basically there. What we also see is that many of the retired teachers are rehired. So teachers that have been on retirement are asked to come back for a number of hours, which also is not an ideal solution, but at least you get some experience back into the classroom, which brings already something up to it. In many cases, school headmasters will also reorganize the school and the workforce in the schools. In most early childhood education in Flanders, you have a caretaker next to a teacher in the classroom. Well, when you don't find a teacher in many classrooms, the caretaker takes over. Also there, that's not an ideal solution. We also have in schools pedagogues that are there to support children who have special needs. Also there, when you don't have a teacher for the classroom, those people tend to end up in the classroom in terms of reorganizing the school so that at least you have a teacher for every classroom. Worst case scenario is when you have to close classrooms, when you don't find a teacher and you don't can anymore make sure that people are attended, children are attended to in a good way and are safe. In those cases, sometimes classrooms are closed, but luckily that's more the exception than the rule. That's highly exceptional. From our perspective, we have to broaden the perspective in the sense that there's need for a new deal as a more future-proof approach. All these measures in the short term don't really help us in solving the problem. We need a more profound way to deal with the problem, and that makes it necessary to invest in several areas. And we see at least 4 big areas where investment is needed in terms of reforming the teacher training, so that as well in terms of accessibility, that you can attract more people, but also in terms of the quality of the education there, so that the workforce has a more is qualitative better than this is the case at the moment sometimes. To make it more attractive to young people to choose for the profession, it's also necessary to reform the human resources management in school, and to create in such a way a working environment that is really very attractive to people to work in. At this point, in Flanders, we have a very centralized approach in terms of the careers of students, of teachers, how the conditions are created in which they have to work. What is necessary is an evolution from centralized to decentralized approach, so that the school boards can organize their schools and their human resources management in the schools in such a way that it's adapted to what they need, to what is needed in their schools and what their workforce needs. At this point, this is very difficult. Another important issue there is to focus on successful recruitment and onboarding practices. Look at the employee journey to take an overall picture of, okay, when somebody starts in our school, what is the kind of perspective that we give him? What is the kind of support that we give him at the different stages of his development? How do we integrate professional development at different phases in his development, from induction to expert teachers? So make it attractive for people to work there and give them a perspective in terms of the career that they can have. So make these schools and make our schools more attractive work and learning places that are adapted to the needs of people of, let's say, the 21st century. So there's more to teaching also than teaching hours. At this point, a teacher profession is measured in teaching hours. So it's about, okay, you have 24 teaching hours, so that's your profession, which in terms of perspective by the broader world makes it clear. So you only have to work for 24 hours, while we have a 36 or 38 hours work week, and you have a lot of vacation as a teacher. So wow, that's a nice job. Well, that's not a very challenging job, and it doesn't add to the status of the job. So we have plans to go for, let's say, a 36-hour work week for a teacher, where in the job is already included the time to discuss with your fellow colleagues, to develop with your fellow colleagues, to professionalize yourself, so that you don't only look at the job as being teaching hours, but take the broader perspective on the job of an early childhood educator. It turns out, and also that's a very important, in terms of the work environment, that new school buildings that are adapted to the needs of children and teachers at the moment are a very attractive issue in terms of getting people to the job. Most of our schools buildings are old, are not very attractive in terms of working places. So when it seems a not so relevant issue, but it appears to be very relevant also, for example, where it works in terms of where we see that teacher shortages are low, in many cases has to do with the environment that people have to work in, the conditions under which teachers have to work. So it's an important issue to take care to, next to quality and next to the other issues, of course. And we also see definitely that incentives for working in challenging educational areas might make a difference. If we want to keep our people into the inner cities, for example, where they have to work with challenging classes and important issues, have to tackle important issues of early childhood, in early childhood education, well, then we have to make it even more worthwhile to go to those schools. And so incentives for teachers there makes a real difference. None of this will work, basically, if we can capture it in a coherent plan. The alignment and coherence of the different measures that are taken are necessary conditions to make it work. And that means that we have to make a new deal between all stakeholders. So teacher unions, parents associations, the whole society has to be involved in making this new deal, and making sure also that in educational policy, when measures are taken, that they are part of a broader plan. If they are just measures to, let's say, go into one or the other problem, but are not part of a bigger plan, it won't work in the long run. So it's definitely necessary to in that sense go for a broad plan that goes for the long term, and that has to involve different measures that are related, for example, to the 4 that we are mentioning here. So far, my input for the discussion here. I'm really looking forward to the questions and the further development of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the exciting presentation. Before starting the questions, I would like to ask the colleagues to open the Slido poll answers about the biggest difficulties the participants here see in their countries on early childhood education. And those answers which were answered by several people, they are showing in bigger. So as you can see, it's working conditions, high pressure, low salary, gender inequality, adult-child ratio, big class size, stress and burnout, parents and staff shortage. There are lots of here. I would like to ask the presenters which would be the 3 biggest challenge which you would consider in your country, and especially where do you feel where can you find solutions? Do you think that it is school level? Do you think it's national level or even European level pressures on countries in some way, even though we have to note that education is a national competence? And who are, do you think, or who should be in the key actors for you to solve these problems? Who would like to start?
Yeah, thank you so much. To be honest, I think they are very much interconnected. For instance, if you look at Peter's presentation, I think it was spot on. So for some, it has to do with the working environment. Do we have modern buildings that can support new learning environments and special education needs that we know is a growing concern for pedagogues, early childhood teachers? But I think the overarching problem or challenge must be that that our colleagues do not feel that they have enough colleagues at their working places, and that creates barriers in terms of working conditions, that you can actually conduct the work in a qualified manner because you are not enough staff personnel. It has issues or implications for the professional autonomy that then will lead others, or some at least, to go outside the profession where they could in another way be able to use their competences more freely, more autonomously, and therefore I think the staff shortages and the teacher-child ratio is a big concern, and perhaps it is always connected into some of the other concern. It also has implications in terms of can I go on continuous professional development if my colleagues need to run faster while I'm gone. I think a lot of pedagogues, early childhood teachers will probably say, I think I'm going to wait for a better timing to do so. So yeah, probably the staff shortage, which can look very differently in terms of whatever you look into. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I follow on Casper. I think, but there is, of course, and the staff shortage as a real impact on working conditions of the people that are there now. And the difference I made in the presentation between short-term measures, when you ask me, well, where is the solution for the urgent issues at the moment? Well, they should be found and there's no other way at the school level, and that's how they try to deal with it at the moment. They try to be creative in finding solutions adapted to their specific conditions, but it's also they always have to work with the measures they get from the government and from people around them, and that they create the basic conditions, and they also have to create the conditions on the long term. Otherwise, they will be finding short-term measures that really don't fit the problem in terms of the long term. So at that level, you have to say, well, you have to work on working conditions. The government has to take its responsibility to create a context wherein those things can, and that has to do with teacher education, that has to do with money, with buildings, and with working conditions and regularities in the whole of the package.
Thank you very much, Peter. I would like to ask firstly, Elena, about something you mentioned in your presentation about the working hours, that, for example, in the private early childhood education, the working hours starts already 6:30. This is very convenient, of course, for parents who start to work very early. You know, not everyone is working in an office from 9 to 5. But at the same time, doesn't it have a pressure on teachers and the whole school to provide enough staff to fill in the working times the parents are really needing to open the early childhood education institutions?
As you said, not everyone finish work until o'clock. So many parents, they were obliged to take their children to the private sector, even if they could not afford to pay a private school. But it seems that how they manage to do it is that they split the sheets of teachers. So some of them will go from, let's say, from 6 o'clock, until 1 o'clock, and then there is who will be there, let's say, from 1 until as long as they work. Because we also have the problem with how many hours, the working hours in a week. So teachers cannot work more than what the law says. On average, it's 40 hours a week. Maybe in some sectors we have 38 or 39, but it shouldn't exceed the 40 hours per week. So this is the issue that they try to do in public schools. They try to cover this by hiring more teachers, the unemployed teachers that we have, and on not on the same, they get them on contract, but still they get the opportunity to work and to help parents with their working schedule and everything.
Thank you very much, Elena. Kasper?
Yeah, I just realized that I didn't come up with any solutions, so I just want to draw quick back to my presentation where I mentioned mentorship programs, because what we see is it's a lot easier to retain staff than to recruit the staff that you might have in the future. So if you want to retain colleagues, you will also need to have some sort of programs in an introductory period. For instance, if you just finished your program, your teacher training, you come out. What we see in Denmark is 5 years after, around 20% actually leave the profession again. So we need to do something in those years. We also need to do something that make the education attractive. That could be salary, could be working conditions, it could be career prospects. I think what is the easiest thing to do is systemic education planning, where you have clear career prospects for an early childhood teacher that goes into the profession, not out the profession, where you can develop your competences in a professional manner, which can be used to support your work with the children and young people. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Kasper. I would like to ask Geraldine if you have any comments on the presentations, but also I can see that there are comments here and in the chat, and if you have if you would like to react to these comments. One of them says that apparently there is no any difference concerning teacher shortages in early childhood and education sector and other sectors. And from Ireland, our colleague says one challenge is to convince parents, the public and private policymakers, that early childhood education is education and an important foundation in children's early living and is more than childcare. Recognizing early childhood education as a profession should then lead, hopefully, to improvement in pay, conditions, and status for early childhood education staff. Perception of professions make a difference. Concerning that, it only also raises my question that 2 years ago, the Croatian presidency of the European Union had a very interesting council conclusions about teachers, and they highlighted in every sector what are the biggest challenges, and they really motivated themselves, the ministers of education, to move to improve the conditions, the working conditions, to ensure that there is better access for teaching, and there is better quality of teaching also in early childhood education sector by better salary working conditions. Still, what we can see is that when the council is discussing, there is very slow impact. And even though here are the parents, the education employers, the teachers are saying the same, and the European Commission is saying the same, there is something in between which doesn't work well. What do you think, Geraldine? What is the problem?
Well, that's a very big question. I think the very big problem is a lack of consideration for knowledge in general. In our society at the moment, especially with the pandemic, we've seen, this is very personal reflection, not the European Commission, please. But during the pandemic, you know, we've seen a lot of people questioning what experts were saying. And I think there is a general questioning and a lack of recognition of knowledge and the role of knowledge and how it can help society progress towards being more inclusive, better, and so on. And I think we really need a shift in how we think about schools. They are not just schools to become to teach some skills, and then the children can become good employees and fit with the jobs that are needed. But we really need to rethink also the schools are as places to grow as individuals, as people who think, who feel well, who can take care of the others. And of course, they get some knowledge, and this is extremely important. Of course, we need to provide the basic skills to children. We need to prepare them for contributing to an economic society. But I think we really need to rethink schools as places where human beings are developing, and we need to provide them with an environment which supports that and recognize them as children and not pupils. So I think looking at it this way could also help teachers being seen as educators and really people who pass on knowledge, skills, who support little kids becoming happy citizens, happy people in life. So the schools shouldn't be seen only as a knowledge place. So knowledge should be seen really as something, not only skills and competences, but also being ready to live with the others and being able to contribute to society. And then the knowledge society becomes not only a competent society, but also something where people grow and flourish. But this is just me and my ideas this morning.
Thank you very much. Your ideas are very welcome. I would like to ask the colleagues to open the third and final slide, Opal, because we still have like around 10 minutes to discuss among us. And I would like to ask the participants, what do you think are the ingredients of good collaborative education leadership in the early childhood education sector in your country? What do you think are the good ingredients? And I will give you some time also as presenters to think about that. And I would like to ask you about the issue of knowledge, because it's very important what Geraldine mentioned now, but also in her presentation about there are researches, but we need to have more research. We need to have more understanding who are the early childhood education staff, since they are so broad. And Casper also mentioned the research conducted in relation to the trade unions' work on teacher shortage. Last week, there was a very interesting conference of the Belgian presidency of the European Union, evidence-based policymaking. And our network tries to bring together research and policymaking. But as I can see, many times this connection is lacking, either because the research is not focusing on maybe hot topics, which are important for people, the education sector, the stakeholders within the education sector, or because the policy wants just to develop without really focusing on concrete data because they don't have time to wait for the data. What do you think about how to really improve better research-based, evidence-based policy making in order to basically deal with all of these problems you highlighted? Who would like to start? Yes, Peter?
Well, when I, in my presentation, referred to taking measures that are part of a coherent plan, then I would like to have that plan in terms of policy to be evidence-informed, so that it makes, and the logic behind it is basically evidence-informed and educational rather than in terms of political practice, which is at the moment basically some of the perspectives they mostly take when they are developing policy. So, and I think when we make it evidence-informed and we base it on research as much as possible, because of course there will always be differences in terms of interpretation, but then at least we have a guarantee that, let's say, whenever also political perspectives change, when the evidence-informed is the underlying baseline, then definitely from an educational perspective, it develops in the right way. Because whenever another political party wins the elections and changes the policy, in education, that's a disastrous moment because you're working on something and then everything changes into another direction, and that's not the way you want to educate your children. You need a coherent plan. So I think it's important to value the evidence that's there with its restrictions. It's not that it's something that you can follow like in the positive sciences, but it definitely has a worthwhile perspective on how you have to do things in education.
Yes, but not every policymakers have the resources to make research themselves or to have independent research. So
no, but they can read research and they can make sure that they are informed in the right way. And I think that's where I think basically definitely in Flanders the research is available. Not very specific, but it's available, it's there. And you have organizations that try to make clear to the politicians what the issues are there. But time over time, you see them prioritize in terms of political perspectives rather than in terms of the evidence that's there. And that's the main issue at the moment.
I would like to give the floor to Casper, but before you start to speak, can I ask the colleagues to share with us the outcome of the Slido Post 3, please? And Casper.
Thank you. I think to some extent, I actually agree with Peter, but I also think we need to institutionalize this connection between research and informed policy making. I think this is done to some degree in Denmark. Definitely, the research is available, but what we need to do is to get it closer to praxis. We need to get it closer to the everyday working life of early childhood teachers, and sometimes this is not done in a coherent way, and therefore it's difficult to align with political initiatives. We have a tradition in Denmark for having commissions, and sometimes this just takes forever. But we had this reform commission that actually based a lot of their recommendations on evidence and evidence gathered by the social partners as well, in terms of the importance of career prospects, in terms of the importance of being able to specialize in your profession. And they recommended this for the government in terms of education reforms, and it's now on the table. So I think it is happening, but I agree that in a lot of instances it's not happening to an extent that it should. So we could institutionalize it. I think the European Union also plays an important role in the European semester, as well as sort of coordinating a lot of this information we have. For instance, you have the training monitor. I think this is a very good tool to see how far are we behind, what are we looking at, what should we do, and what are generic problems and what are not, and where could we have common European solutions to some of our collective problems.
Thank you very much, Casper. And I would like to ask you again, what do you think about the outcomes? What are the ingredients of good collaboration? One of the biggest is social dialogue, then time to talk. How social dialogue is functioning in Denmark? For example, how many times you are meeting the ministry per year? Or is there any process when you are obliged to formally be consulted on your opinion on a policy initiative?
Well, in Denmark, we have a very strong tradition for social dialogue. For instance, this is also underpinned by that we have a high collective bargaining coverage. So therefore, we have legitimacy in terms of being able to influence policy making, but also influence education reform, etc. So we meet with the ministry. We also meet a lot with the employers, and usually we try to do consensus-based positions, because in that way it's a lot easier to engage in political change in the profession. And this is very much carried forward by investing in it. So having good productive collective agreements, but also going to the ministries sometimes hand in hand with the employers, even though we're not agreeing on all points. Maybe we should agree on the few points that has to do with staff retention and some good recommendations to cope with that. So I think the social dialogue that was functioning very well. There are always challenges, but that's a part of the social dialogue, I think.
Thank you. Peter, what is your opinion about the outcomes of this Slido poll? And I also would like to ask you a question, like how you are cooperating, for example, teacher unions with other stakeholders, and is it regular or is it ad hoc?
It's regular. We also, like in Denmark, apparently have a strong tradition of social dialogue. Also with the teacher unions and the ministry. So but I think the main finding at the moment is that it's much more difficult to come to a consensus than it was in the years before. So there is some tendency towards a priority to politics, where the ministry thinks, okay, we can talk and we can have discussions about it, but at the end we decide, basically in that sense. Which makes it difficult, because you can only realize something in education when it's agreed upon between the different stakeholders and they are really willing to put it into practice in schools. And so when there's disagreement, you see in terms of implementation of the material that things are going all kinds of ways and that it doesn't work out really in the long run. So it's really, really important that the social dialogue is functioning well. And that's basically based on trust between the different partners around the table. That's an important issue there, and that we have to build on. And in terms of a society that's more and more polarized, where there's more and more polarization, that's very difficult, because everybody wants to make his point and is not really looking for a consensus at some points, and makes it difficult.
Thank you very much. And we are basically over of our webinar, but I still would like to give the floor to Elena. Elena, do you think in Cyprus the parents are well heard by ministries, by other associations?
Yes, I actually wanted to comment on that. In the last, let's say, 7-8 years, parents have a very good cooperation with the Ministry of Education, and the previous ministers gave voice to parents, fortunately, and this cooperation continues until today. The new minister we have is a very, very good one. She comes from the education sector. She's not a political person, so she has the way to bring people together and to have a very good dialogue for the benefit of education and children. So I think we have quite a few problems. We also have political interference. We have secret agendas, definitely, but in general, I think we are in a good way to reach a good level in education.
Thank you very much. So as a conclusion, it's important to have collaboration. It's important to have time for collaboration, and it's important really to trust each other to really improve the systems and solve problems if there are any, and to move into a better quality in the future. I would like to thank a lot for the presenters and also the participants. Those of you who would like to join the next webinar, it will be 13:45 in Brussels time on vocational education. Please engage yourself with the ELNA network activities, and if you have any research, inspiring cases, or webinar ideas, please let us know, and we can take into this consideration in the second year of the activities. Thank you very much. Big applause to the presenters. Bye-bye. Have a nice lunchtime.